Hey guys, this is week 8, I believe, with we're going to be talking about the skin today. I hope you are enjoying your journey, learning about your body. I know it's a lot of information, so do not be overwhelmed. Do not feel like you have to do all of it in 1 week. Do not feel like you have to rush through. Take your time, okay? There's so much to learn. I mean, if you think about it, people go to med school to study the human body, and then they also have to specialize, and it takes them years to be able to specialize in a certain field. And so, again, you're not supposed to be experts on this. You're trying to learn as much as you can, but don't feel like you have to overwhelm yourself. Take your time. This video series, the Flex class is up for I think as long as you're enrolled on OutSchool. So you can take your time and take it. I will just stop commenting after week 9, although you're more than welcome to reach out. Feel free to reach out to me after class is done, after the 9 weeks is up. So I don't want to feel like after 9 weeks, boom, you have to be done. No, you have all the material available to you, and you have me as well. So always feel free to reach out to me with any questions or concerns. With that, I just will stop posting at week 9. So let's jump into skin. So the skin is probably the coolest thing for me to talk about because it is the biggest organ. We've been talking about a lot of organs: our stomach, our small intestines, our kidneys, our liver, all these things, your heart. Your skin is the biggest organ, and it's covering and protecting your insides from getting infections and injuries. Think about if we did not have skin, we'd look kind of funny. My daughter actually she's 2, she has a puzzle that has like the different layers. So you have the skin, and then you have the muscles, and you have, your bones, and then you have your inner, like, insides, and then you have, those layers. And she gets scared every time she takes the skin off because it looks creepy. I mean, it's just your body with like just the muscles. And if that was the case, though, our muscles, our tissues, our organs would get infected, and so that our skin is a protector. Our skin also keeps us cool. It's getting to be where I'm at, but getting to be spring, and the weather's so nice, and pretty soon summer's going to hit. And in where I'm from in South Carolina, it's like 90 to 100-degree temperatures. And so I know that my body's going to start cooling itself off by sweating. And so we have sweat glands that end up cooling our bodies off. Part of that is to regulate our internal temperature, because if it's actually a couple degrees, 4 to 5 degrees above our normal, which is 98.7, or 4 to 5 degrees below, it can be fatal. Normally, if you're running a fever, again, that's an indication that your body is fighting some sort of disease or fighting some sort of illness. Your white blood cells, your antibodies are working, then that's going to elevate your temperature, and that's what's causing that fever. It's just an indication that your body is working to fight something off. However, if it gets above 104, that's normally a sign to go to the doctor. Really above, 100 and 100.1, that's, you're in the safe zone, but 104 can get dangerous. So keep that in mind next time you're in a fever, to make sure that you're watching to make sure it's not getting too high, because it can harm your body, as well as if it gets too cold. When we are cool, or when it's cold, we are hot. Hold on, back up. When we're cool, when it's cold outside, there you go. Our body needs to stay warm, and so we end up shivering. Okay, and that's our body's way of generating heat, so our body can stay at its temperature. If it ends up dropping by about 4 degrees, our organs will end up shutting down, or they can shut down. But our body also sends all of our blood that's in our fingertips. If you can tell, like, you have a little pink on your fingertips, your face, parts of your body that do not eat at your toes, they'll send it to the middle of your body and your core, so that it will stay warm and keep you alive. So that's why a lot of times if people are out like climbing a mountain, they get stuck in the mountains where it's really cold during the winter and no one knows they're out there. They might end up losing an appendage. They might end up losing fingers or an arm or a leg because they're trying to keep all your organs warm. Well, it doesn't happen very often, but it can happen. So keep that in mind. Your body also makes vitamin D that is generated from UV light to your enzymes. That UV light generates enzymes in your skin, which ends up making the vitamin D through your body. Some people who are normally have lived in places that are warmer and get a lot of vitamin D, sometimes their body doesn't do well in areas that are not as intense with the sun. For example, my cousin is adopted. He's from Guatemala, and my uncle and aunt adopted them, and they live in Pennsylvania. And so he's been living there for a couple of years, and he started developing like a skin condition where his body wasn't producing enough vitamin D, and it was becoming deficient and was really hard on him because his skin was used to having more intense rays where he lived closer to the equator. So they ended up having to move to Florida because they had to protect, make sure that his skin was getting enough vitamin D or making enough vitamin D so that his body will need that vitamin. It's an essential vitamin that our body needs. So then they end up having to move so that he could have that. So it is very important that we do get in the sun, but we do protect our skin, because if we do not put sunscreen on or something to protect our skin can actually end up being damaged, and we don't want damaged skin like when we get sunburned. And sometimes that happens even when we put sunscreen on. I've put sunscreen on and reapplied it every 2 hours, but like my shoulders hate the sun. And my skin is very fair. My arms and my legs are pretty tan, but my skin is very fair. But I do have to put sunscreen on constantly in order for it to basically protect it so I don't get burnt. Also, a side note about your skin and sunlight. Sometimes you actually, where you live, you get used to where you live, just like my cousin got used to living in Guatemala and then moved to a place that's cooler than where he is originally from. For instance, I went to Nicaragua, and Nicaragua is closer to the equator as well, but I'm not. I'm in the close on the line of the temperate zone, so I'm pretty much. I get warm weather during the summer and winter, and then we get cooler, weather in the fall and then we get snow. Some a little bit in the winter, but not a ton compared to other states in the United States. So when I went, though, my skin it was actually in March. I left and it was like 32 degrees and here, but when I got off the plane, it was like 90 because they don't have like 4 seasons like we do. So I ended up getting off the plane and went through the week, and I ended up hiving, like my skin broke out. Hived, kept itching, and I realized that I was allergic to the sun. So because the sun rays are more intense, my body wasn't used to that, and it actually reacted to the intensity of the sun. Because it's closer, the sun's rays are actually more direct near the equator. So I was getting lots of vitamin D, but my skin was not used to that. So keep that in mind as well when it comes to your skin and protecting it, that the sun rays intensity is different in different locations, and you have to protect it in different ways in order to have reactions or to not get it burnt and things like that. Also, skin is made with different layers, and that's what we're going to spend the next few minutes talking about. Our first layer is your epidermis. That's the surface of your skin, and it is water resistant. If you go to the pool, if you get in the shower, bathtub, the water will roll off your skin in droplets. It's not going to, we'll talk about in a second how like one part of your skin can actually wash away, and water can get absorbed into your skin, but it's not a ton. And when it does, it creates a different effect than what you're going to think. But if your skin wasn't water resistant, think about all the water that you might be using when you're in the shower or in the bathtub. You become like a human water balloon, and that would not be good. So the surface of our skin has to be that water resistant. It is a sheet of cells that are crowded together. Our body is constantly making new cells, but they're at the bottom of the epidermis. So the process pushes the old cells up toward them, making them flat. They fill with tough proteins called keratin. The keratin ends up dying, and that tough skin barrier protects you. That keratinized layer protects you against the world, which is why, we get scrapes, we get bruises and things like that, but it's really, our skin is very versatile. It protects us from a lot of conditions. Think about, going outside and different things brushing up against it, or for me, I just am clumsy and end up hitting it along other things. And I'm really grateful. I've only, gotten a couple major injuries and not any more than that. So, but anyway, it really does protect it and protect it from our environment. The oldest cells, though, on your epidermis fall off. And we end up losing 40,000 of these every minute, which is crazy. Sometimes, this is going to sound kind of gross, but it's kind of interesting to see. You can end up putting like a piece of clear tape on your skin and pulling it off, and you can actually see your dead skin cells because they kind of lay on the very top surface of our skin. You can do that with like your nose, you can do that with your arm, and you can actually see where your pores are, things like that. So it's kind of gross, but it's interesting at the same time, so you can see kind of your dead skin cells. Also, especially during like the winter time, we often get a lot of dead skin cells because our skin is drier. We're not producing as much what we call sebum. And so we will end up losing a lot of that dry, flaky skin. You normally can see it like kind of flake off, and that's just your dead skin cells, and that's because we lose them a lot, especially during the winter when our skin is a lot more dry. The dermis is our second layer. It is made of a connective tissue, meaning its cells are separated from one another by a jelly that contain lots of strong fibers in it. This contains our sweat glands, blood vessels, hair follicles, and nerve endings. So it contains a lot of these fibers. Sweat glands, again, are used, they're tiny tubes, and they're used when we need to produce, sweat to cool us down, and when our body gets overheated. It's also connected to your hair follicles, or small glands called sebaceous glands. These secrete an oily substance called sebum, and sebum basically helps your skin not dry or crack. So it produces that oil. You can probably see where my light is like shining from my computer. I have like a little glistening on my forehead. Well, my skin's really not oily. If I rub my hand against my skin, it's actually just smooth. It's not really dry. It's not really oily. However, in the summer, I produce a lot of oil. My skin is really trying not to crack, and so sometimes you might get a little more shine during the summer from that oil from your sebum. And so that's why, again, like during the winter when the temperature is not as hot, so it's not drying your skin out as quick, but the air is like almost dry. And so it still produces that oil, but it's not going to produce it as much. And that's why a lot of times during the winter time, we need to wear lotion or something on our skin if our skin gets too dry and cracked. So we talked about how our epidermis is water resistant, but isn't waterproof. The sebum that we just talked about in the dermis ends up washing away after a length of exposure, which is why we get little wrinkly fingers. It's not because you're getting old, it's because that water is actually getting into your skin and it's saturating it, which is making it look wrinkled. These two little videos are the experiment is called a wrinkled finger experiment. I challenge you to try this at home. It's a really simple thing. You need a glass of water or a bowl of water and your hand. That's all you need. And you put it in there for about 10, 15 minutes and see how quick it wrinkles, which finger wrinkles the fastest. Then you let it dry out, and I would time to see how long it takes to dry out. And then see even your friction ridges. Your friction ridges become more evident as your wrinkles are drying out, or leaving as your hand is drying out from that saturated water that got into your skin. So look at that experiment. It's not going to take you 30 minutes or anything. It is fast mode, so they like kind of time lapsed it to where it was like really quick, so that you can actually see the whole process in a couple minutes. So see what it does. Make some observations on which finger gets wrinkly the quickest, and hopefully you can do this one at home because it's really easy. I had one student do it while we were doing the lecture, and he figured out how long it took his fingers to get wrinkled just by observing them. So the last layer is it's called your subcutaneous fat, or hypodermis, or subcutaneous tissue. It's interchangeable. It is mostly made of fat and helps your body stay warm and absorb shock. I don't know if any of you have ever been into like the ocean or water that's extremely cold. And it's normally we go swimming and go into the ocean when the water is, at a warmer temperature that our bodies can acclimate to it pretty quickly. However, me personally, I've been into the Pacific Ocean when it was summer, but it still was like early in the summer, so the water wasn't warm, like really warm yet. And I'm so glad for this layer of my skin because it absorbed my shock. I jumped in there, like had all my clothes on, jumped in, just was being adventurous, and I literally my lips started turning blue and I started shivering automatically. My skin from my fingers turned basically white. My knuckles were white because my body was trying to keep it inside of me, my organs warm. But if I didn't have this layer, it wouldn't have absorbed that shock and it wouldn't help me keep warm during that time. That's why if you are an animal fan, you probably know polar bears and animals that are in the Arctic end up having a very thick layer of this type of skin. Or even like whales have a lot of blubber. They have it because they absorb shock because they're in colder temperatures, and so their body needs that to keep them warm. One of my dad's students ended up telling him one time that he had a lot of blubber because he wasn't he was a little bit heavier set, and that he had a lot of blubber to keep him warm during the winter. So don't ever tell that to anybody, but it's interesting to know that we do have a little bit of that subcutaneous fat to keep us warm, especially during the cooler months, and also when our body is in cooler temperatures, whether that's because you jump into the Pacific Ocean or because you are in an environment like the Arctic. It helps you hold your skin to the tissues underneath it, and you will find your blood vessels are connected to the nerves of the roots of your hair follicles, which is why when someone pulls your hair, or people probably call you tender-headed because your hair might be sensitive when you pull on it, it is actually connected to nerves, so sending that stimulation to your brain saying, ouch, when they pull on it, especially if you have a tangle or something, you're brushing it really hard. You also have hair follicles all over your body except the palms of your hands, your lips, and the soles of your feet. So number one, it would be kind of funny if you had hair on your hands, you wouldn't be able to grab things as easily. They would just kind of slip. Think about fuzzy slippers. They're kind of slippery and soft, and it's harder to grab things. You have friction ridges. You have your hands to be able to grasp really easily. Also, I just think it's a funny visual to think about all the hair that's on your lip. Men can have hair above their lip, but not on their lips. Think about eating your food. Your food would get all stuck in your hair. It just be crazy. And the soles of your feet. Your soles of your feet are smooth. You'll never have any hair follicles on them or any hair growing on the bottoms. But anywhere else is up for game, even though they might not be as long as your head with the hair follicles, because it has 10,000 of them alone just on your head. Okay. Here is a review of the layers of your skin for you to review. It's kind of a silly song, so but this will even talk about something called melanin, which is actually what makes your skin the color it is. For instance, I do not have a ton of melanin in my skin. My skin is very fair. However, you might have a lot of melanin, and that's okay. It's just how your body, how your skin produces that coloring. However, I do have specks of melanin because I have freckles, which are on my arms, and I get them a lot during the summer on my face. So it just depends, and that's okay. But they will also cover the word melanin in there, so I want to kind of give you a heads up on what that is. So we talked a little bit about how our body shivers to keep us cool or keep us warm when it is cold, and just because your skin has to adjust. Your body needs to keep the deeper organs warm, so it sends more hot blood there and less to your skin when it gets cold. Your hair follicles are actually attached to tiny muscles. So when you're cold, when you're starting to shiver, those muscles end up contracting and raising all those hair follicles all over your body, and that makes it goosebumps. Those little goosebumps are actually tiny, itty bitty muscles that are on your arm. When you shiver, again, your muscles are relaxing and contracting to generate heat very quickly. If you look at this video, it is really cool because this guy goes into this chamber that a lot of athletes use to actually heal quicker. Think about when you get hurt, when you get injured, like if you twist your ankle, or I had a student who tore his ACL in his knee, and the first thing you normally do is put ice on it, or if you bump your head, you normally put ice on it to kind of let the bump go down, or to just make it feel better. This chamber is actually doing that, but it's colder than the coldest place on earth, Antarctica. So he goes in this chamber to see the reaction that his body would have to that freezing temperature. He has basically a tank top on, shorts, and nothing else. Like, he's just no shoes, and you get to actually see how his body responds. He can only be in there for 3 minutes. He's not in danger, but these actually work very well. I actually had a student who uses this for his ACL, and he went for like a week and for like 3 or 4 minutes at a time, and it really showed improvement with his healing process. So that's why they use them, but it also is interesting to see how your body responds to that cold temperatures as well. So watch that, see how your skin adjusts to that. That's like one of my students' favorite videos to watch about that experience. Your skin also has to heal itself. So basically, when you have a serious injury like a deep cut or burn, it ends up having to form a scar tissue, and it forms it over time. So we talked about in week 1 how your body produces what we call platelets. So when you do get like a scrape or a burn, your skin literally forms a mesh, which forms that scab and protects that hole or that place where you rip that skin off or burn that skin, and then it holds out there, and eventually that will heal, and then it will form scar tissue. Scar tissue is different than skin. It does not have sweat glands. So if you have a big area that has scar tissue, you're not going to be able to sweat in that big area. You're not going to be able to have hair follicles. The hair won't grow back there. It's also tighter, kind of is shrunken. It's lighter, and it's more sensitive to light. So it's completely different than our normal skin when it comes to how it can be controlled in the environment that we're in. So this little video here is about a burn survivor. He was a firefighter. He went to fight a forest fire. He actually was a firefighter, and he ended up getting kind of surrounded by these trees that were erupting in flames. While he got in his fire truck, him and his buddies got in the fire truck, got out, and he ended up crashing his fire truck, and he had to literally run to the fire to be able to save himself. and his two buddies ended up not making it. He was the only one who made it, but his body was burned like 60% of it. So think about taking like your skin and putting it in the dryer and shrinking it, like shrinking your clothes. And that's how his body is all around him. And he's still living, his body's healed over time, but 60% of his body is not skin anymore, it's scar tissue, which means he has to wear long sleeves. That means he cannot expose his skin into a lot of light or a lot of sunlight. His skin cannot sweat. So if he was outside for a long period of time and he got overheated, his body couldn't release that sweat to cool him down. And so it could be very fatal for him. So think about this when you might get an injury, or you know somebody who has like an injury that is very severe, because that will impact their living when it comes to being outdoors and being near intense rays. Because it just, they can't. They can't do that. So watch that. It's very inspirational. It's not graphic. He is wearing a long sleeve shirt. The kids are actually talking to him, asking him questions. It's like a question and answer session. But he is such an inspiration to me that he took such a difficult time being burnt. Like, he had to be in the hospital for a long time because they were what we call 3rd-degree burns. And so they were deep into the subcutaneous tissue. And it takes a long time. Like, they have to do a lot of skin grafts. They have to really like dress his skin so that it can heal. And so he's just an inspiration that he took such a hard time and made it positive, so that we can learn from it and that we can understand why our skin behaves the way it does, especially when we get into a serious injury. And I know if, like, for instance, like, I get burned. If I get burned, like, I normally get it from the cooking and from on the stove. And probably most of you, that's like the most common burn ever. And you get like a little blister. But thinking about being like intense, like being through a fire, it's mind-boggling. But even with like small burns, here's a tip for you. If you ever get burned like on the stove, tell mom and dad to keep heavy whipping cream in the fridge, because the heavy whipping cream actually has fat in it that will actually cool down your skin versus water. Water actually can make it worse than make it better. And a lot of times that's the first thing we do. We burn it under cold water or we put ice on it. But actually the whipping cream, heavy whipping cream, or like if you have milk, normally the thicker the better, pretty much. That's why heavy whipping cream is really thick. And I normally put my hand in it, and I've had like a really bad burn that covered like my palm of my hand before. Put it in there right after it happened from like grabbing something that was hot. And it, like, obviously my hand, I don't really have any scar tissue. My hand's perfectly fine. And it really helped it. It's kind of the same way with eating salsa, and your tongue's like on fire from eating like hot salsa, and you drink water, and it pretty much intensifies it to me. And so normally if you put like sour cream or you have milk, it will actually quench that to burn versus the water. So they're kind of the same thing with our burns on our skin as well. The last thing we're going to talk about is our fingerprints. So fingerprints basically are tiny friction ridges, raised ridges. You have them because it's easier for us to grab things. It's kind of like an adaptation for us to be able to use our hands to be able to pick up things and them not slip. They differ from finger to finger and from person to person. A cool challenge for y'all as you do fingerprints this week for your projects, you don't have to have like an expensive finger pad or anything, but you can even do it with a black marker, like a washable Crayola marker, or like a whatever brand that's washable, that's not going to, like, not a Sharpie, not a permanent marker, but a washable regular marker that you would color with. You can color each of your tips and then press them down so that they will make the imprint or your fingerprint. Challenge while you're doing that, though, to see if your family members have similar ones, if it is actually by inheritance that we get our fingerprints if it's passed down from generation to generation. Because it's classified in 3 different ways. It's classified by an arch. So the arch, if you can see here, is almost like a big hill. And you normally can see that more in the middle of your finger, the top part of your finger. We have a loop that kind of goes around and comes back. And then you have a whorl, which is the circular, almost like a circle in of itself. And again, you don't have to have all whorls, all loops, all arches. You can even have a mixture between an arch and a loop, or a loop and a whorl. And those are actually called composite. And they're a combination of the two. So you could actually have a whorl that might turn into a loop. That's a really bad drawing, but you see my point. And you can identify them by looking at that center of your finger. Also, detectives and people who do forensic science, they also see darker parts of your fingerprint, which are called like islands, and you'll see that talking about here in this video. And you can actually see them around where the fingerprint pattern is. You have different islands, and that's how they can actually identify who did the crime, by looking even at the fingerprint pattern and even the islands, because people have different islands in different darker areas at different parts of their finger. You also, for instance, that's how they can identify people. We have fingerprints on file. For me, I've had to do like a SLED check, background check, when I worked with children, just to make sure that I had no like criminal background. And they had to do fingerprints on me, as well as when my daughter was born, they even did fingerprints. So they even did as, young, not that she had a criminal background when she was born, but they wanted to see what her fingerprint type, and they can even do that even at birth. So here, this video is how to identify fingerprints, and this one is how do they form. And so you get to watch both of those lovely videos about your fingerprints. Your project this week is actually doing your own fingerprinting and identifying them. So you can look at these videos, you can look at these pictures to be able to see what your fingerprints are, and then do some of your family members, do your siblings, do your aunt and uncle, do your mom and dad, grandparents if they live nearby, to see if they are similar or different. And please let me know. I'm very curious to see what your fingerprints are and if your fingerprints are similar to your parents or similar to your relatives. So let me know how that goes, and I hope you'll have a great week learning about your skin. Please let me know if you have any questions, and I will hopefully see you sometime soon. Bye, guys.